Having left the damaged capital city of Kathleen behind, we followed the simple dirt road southeast, the dreaded Evil Root Forest just a few days' march away. The road was eerie and silent, and here and there lay skeleton and zombie remains, monsters destroyed recently during their attack on Kathleen. Leading our party forward, Huelsman suddenly ordered a halt to our advance. Something wasn't right, and he instructed that we stop and search the immediate area. Poking around just off the edge of the road, we then came across what appeared to be a small but obvious mass grave. Standing alongside the freshly turned soil, the party looked at me, unsure of what to do next. While a part of me wanted to just leave well enough alone, I instead instructed everyone to explore the grave to see what we might find. Curious as well, my fellow heroes began to dig at the site, soon excavating down about a foot in the loose soil. We then found a variety of human corpses within the grave site, a few dozen or so in various states of decay. The scene was rather grisly, but it was something I was starting to grow used to. They appear to be part of the Angel of Death's army, Sainairs began, disturbed by the find. But they don't appear animated anymore. Examining the corpses a little more, it didn't take our party long to recognize that there were two sets of bodies here, one set that was in various stages of decay and a second that appeared to have just been buried yesterday. Further, the newly slain were certainly dressed in better clothing and appeared to be wearing gear. Could they be adventurers? Then, before our eyes, several of the undead corpses began to shift about and slowly stood to face us. Shockingly, one of the zombies even gasped a warning to our party before shambling forward to attack. Follow the Angel of Death back to the Evil Root, and suffer our fate. Equipped with newer short swords, the 6 zombies came at us as if they wanted to pull all of us down into the grave as well. Battling the monsters, Sainairs grabbed his holy symbol from around his neck and commanded the zombies to be gone, a unique clerical ability. Several of the undead shunned the power and turned to flee, becoming easy targets for our bows and slings. After we suffered some minor wounds in the battle, the undead were finally dispatched and we dragged them all back to their unmarked grave, about to rebury them. While rather macabre, Huelsman suggested that the corpses be searched first. Surprisingly, we found a journal in good shape and recently updated on the body of the presumed leader. Willing to take the time to carefully study the journal, I soon deduced that the monsters were the remains of an initial adventuring party sent to defeat the Angel of Death by Lord Robert as well. Clearly their quest had failed and the luckless heroes were all transformed into undead to serve as a warning. We've spent enough time here, let's go, Huelsman finally interjected, still paranoid about the area. First, we must perform ritual and properly bury the dead, Sainairs added, his faith in Sislan protocol absolute. We unearthed them, we must lay them back to rest. Siding with Sainairs, I ordered the party to rebury the slain adventurers, allowing Sainairs to complete his brief ritual and sanctify the grave site as well. While Huelsman had to bite his tongue with his impatience, the rest of the party agreed with my decision, believing that I had done the right thing. Several hours later, a small sign welcomed us to the tiny halfling village of Corlena, a town so small it was easy to miss as we passed by. Most of the buildings here were single residences to be ignored, but a fairly large building just 100 feet to the southwest was a tavern built to accommodate humans, elves, and dwarves as well, and after an exhausting day of travel the tavern looked warm, secure and inviting. As our party entered the tiny village, a few of us noticed several halflings fearfully staring at us from their homes, a sorrowful look on their faces. Likely, they were victims of the undead army from the Evil Root Forest too, perhaps recently attacked as well, and we wondered how much more death and destruction we would find as we continued southeast. Reaching the tavern and entering, a few halfling barkeeps and waiters nodded their heads as we passed by and quickly we were seated at an old but sturdy table. Like most such establishments, the tavern would need an upfront payment before food and drinks were served. My purse was relieved of 2 silver coins, then our party was brought food and beverages of choice. A few minutes into our meal, however, several frantic and utterly desperate halflings rushed to our table, clearly upset. "You're the adventurers come to town. Please, heroes, you must help us. Our children have been taken, dragged away by kobolds just south of here. Please, come and see. Damn, what bad timing." My heroes looked at one another with annoyance and doubt. We had a life's hard to recover and we didn't have time for a pesky side quest. Yet, we were heroes after all, so side quest it was. The halflings were quite insistent that we leave our seats that very instant and follow them outside. Apparently, the children were abducted just hours earlier near a small storage building south of the tavern. We needed to rescue them now. My fellow heroes nodded with approval and we followed the worried halflings toward the tavern doorway, partially alleviating their anxiety and doing a good deed for these utter strangers. The halflings led us into an old but larger storage shed, the building full of grains and other foodstuffs. Kobold tracks led to a small hole in the far corner of the dark interior, clear evidence that a pack of kobolds had indeed burrowed their way in from below. One of the halflings pointed toward the hole down, her voice still in a panic. There. That's where they've taken our children. You are adventurers, please do what you can to rescue them. There isn't much time. As we neared the kobold tunnel leading underground, we easily found a crude tripwire leading to an arrow trap. The sophistication of the trap was laughable, but clearly the kobolds didn't want anyone to penetrate their lair. Our party cleared the trap, then prepared to descend into the darkness. The tunnel we had been crawling through opened into a room about 2 feet from the floor. The room itself was 30 feet long by 30 feet wide with open doorways leading away to the north and south. To get to them, however, we had to deal with half a dozen or so kobold guards here. There is 5 of us and only a handful of them, Huelsman announced, your heroes deciding how best to interact with the kobold guards. We can take them. Let's try intimidating them first, Sainayers suggested. No sense spilling blood if we don't need to. My heroes agreed and we boldly stepped forward from out of the tunnel leading back to the surface, drawing our weapons and ordering the kobolds to immediately surrender. The smaller, dog-like humanoids didn't see us as a capable threat, however, and rushed us to attack, the skirmish taking several minutes to resolve. The kobolds were soon dealt with, leaving us free to better examine the entrance chamber. I then noticed another spear trap in the ceiling. These kobolds sure loved their traps. Inspecting the area, we soon discovered that the stone floor was of a different color than the tunnel we had just crawled through. The dungeon was much older than the halfling village above, with older meaning more interesting. Deciding to try our way north, we rounded a corner to the right and found an open pit beyond, the area reeking from the strong odor of death. A narrow ledge led around the pit on both sides, potentially offering a relatively safe way forward. The rotting stench coming from somewhere, I decided to investigate not just the pit itself but the flooring leading to the pit on both sides. While the open pit was as empty as it was obvious, I discovered a spring-loaded trapdoor in the floor leading to a second pit just past the first, this one with a spiked floor. Prying the trapdoor open and peering down, the sickly smell of decay struck me like a slap in the face. Something was very dead below. Carefully climbing down, I then found a recent victim of the pit, the corpse of a dead adventurer deceased several weeks. The body had a little loot on it, allowing me to recover a few gold coins, a potion of healing, a skeleton key and a slightly magical short sword. Returning to the surface, I found Ariana feeling the wall to the west of the pits, having noticed something unexpected. Not unlike the secret door that Rachel and I had found back within her father's cellar, Ariana had similarly found a secret door in the wall and within moments she was able to pop it open. The secret door opened west into a brightly lit room that had been turned into a makeshift shrine. The cold stone walls were decorated with chalk symbols and a makeshift altar made from a large wooden crate covered in a moldering white cloth held a golden chalice. On the far side of the room, there was a figure mostly obscured by the altar. This chamber feels peaceful, protected, Sainayers commented, looking about. I sense protection from evil magic around us. The chamber appeared to be a sanctuary. On the far end, the desiccated corpse of an adventuring cleric still knelt before the makeshift altar, clutching her holy symbol in death and now just skin and bones. I felt remarkably at peace in the room. Sainayers seemed correct in his assessment about the protection magic. As we approached the altar, we quickly spotted the golden chalice resting on the altar that radiated a soft golden light. While the altar itself was disappointingly empty, the radiant fluid within the chalice was magical and appeared to have healing properties, the equivalent of 5 potions of healing. Several of us wounded by the kobolds back within the entry chamber, we consumed a little of the chalice liquid, healing our wounds and calming our nerves. The hidden shrine a pleasant surprise. We rested for a few hours and then returned to the hallway containing the 2 pits, carefully negotiating both pits eastward and to a lone door about 100 feet away. Passing through the door, I immediately smelled a terrible stench like a rotting garbage heap. Inside, the room was knee-deep in sludge and rotting debris, full of trash, organic wastes and other substances I didn't want to know about. As we looked about, I then noticed movement from under the debris in one corner, as if something were crawling about underneath. A moment later, whatever was crawling about quickly moved in our direction, burrowing its way toward us with lightning speed. Several large centipedes then popped up out of the garbage and attacked. Larger versions of the normal sort, the giant centipedes were 2 to 3 feet long and fast-moving, having long, segmented, exoskeleton bodies. Worse, they had evolved with a poisonous bite which caused painful wounds. After putting the centipedes down, we spent another 10 minutes poking through the trash and debris. Unfortunately, all of it was garbage, waste matter that was kobold in origin and not worth anything to anyone. Exiting the room of garbage and continuing east, we entered another chamber, the oddly shaped room containing doors in the western and southern walls and a small hole in the northern wall. The floor was also littered with the dung and detritus of various creatures that had passed through the room over the years. There was also a breeze coming from the northern tunnel, the air seemed slightly fresher there. While we found nothing of value within the room, a quick search of the hole in the northern wall revealed a long tunnel that eventually led back to the surface. This is likely where the kobolds originally infested the dungeon, Ariana began, peering upward through the tunnel. Destroying the tunnel would likely prevent the monsters from re-entering the dungeon again. I think you're right, Elf, Eswin added, agreeing with Ariana. After a quick glance of approval from me, Eswin and Ariana used their weapons to attack a section of the tunnel, quickly collapsing it. Good thinking, the kobolds could now no longer access the dungeon from the location. Heading south, and needing to use the skeleton key we had found earlier to unlock the door, we found what appeared to be a modest bedroom, laid out with a bed, side table, a small chest, a few chairs and a table containing a deck of cards. No other obvious exits existed within the bedchamber, but several tapestries lined the far southern wall, gently moving as if a slight wind were present. Searching the chamber, I soon found an insidious blade trap just above the door, intended to slice anyone who got too close. One of the chests contained 20 gold pieces, while a trunk contained 41 electrum pieces, 3 topazes, and a scroll of light. About to head north again, Ariana decided to search the tapestries lining the southern wall, soon discovering a concealed passage that led further south. Deciding to follow the concealed passage, we quickly entered another empty room, the floor broken and cracked with entire chunks missing. Curiously, 4 doors led away to each cardinal direction, north, south, east and west, with each door crudely written upon. The north door had a sign on it hanging askew that read in neat common letters storage under which was crudely scrawled not anymore. Scrawled on the western door was Bach out. On the southern door was the crude image of a skull while the eastern door was tagged with keep out. There, below the northern door, began Ariana, pointing the way. I see moving shadows from under the door, we're not alone. Our party also noted that the paint on the northern door was fresh. I nodded, and Eswin slowly opened the door to further investigate. Inside, we found several more kobolds sitting around a small fire in a circle discussing something. Naturally, they were not pleased to see us and growled as they drew their weapons. Electing to try dialogue over combat, however, the kobolds backed down, one of them explaining that they had just borrowed their tribe's entire treasure and were about to leave the dungeon but were cornered here with the arrival of my party. The kobolds then decided not to test their luck and snuck away back through the southern door, leaving their stolen loot behind. Curious, Ariana searched the 2 bags, finding 1,000 silver pieces in a larger bag and 400 copper pieces in a smaller bag. With the kobolds out of the picture, we looked around the chamber, quickly spotting well-crafted busts on pedestals, 4 along the west wall and 4 along the east wall. Behind the busts on the eastern and western walls were ragged tapestries, ancient and rotten. Searching the 8 busts in the room, I soon found a small switch mechanism that, when pulled, released the bolt keeping a northern door locked and secured. We could now proceed north. The northern door initially resisted but we were able to eventually push it open. The interior was dark and dusty and full of cobwebs, the storeroom hadn't been entered in a long time. Despite the dust, we heard what sounded like dripping water in the far corner that seemed out of place here. A quick search revealed shelves upon shelves of old, crumbling written records and documents, decades old and not worth anything anymore. One corner, however, seemed wet, the moisture glistening in the dim light. As we stepped over to investigate, a large gloppy object dropped in front of us, seemingly with a life of its own. Known as a green slime, it was bright green, wet and sticky, capable of devouring our flesh upon contact and even capable of dissolving metal given enough time. Worse, the amorphous monster was very difficult to harm, each of our blows causing an almost minuscule amount of damage. After being attacked by a second green slime as well, we eventually defeated the strange monsters, burning what was left to ensure they had been destroyed. While the storeroom appeared otherwise empty of anything useful, we decided to search the dusty chamber anyway. That perseverance was soon rewarded, Ariana finding 3 fire opals and an old scroll case containing 4 clerical scrolls. Returning south back to the Chamber of Doors, we then tried the western exit, the one marked Bach out, entering yet another mysterious chamber. The walls of the room were lined with small shelves, each shelf piled high with bones and with shards and splinters and fragments of bone, dozens of skeletons certainly. The ceiling was also decorated with a stucco mural that appeared to be of a religious nature. Searching the chamber and investigating the vast array of bones, we slowly deduced that the skeletons were halflings that died of natural causes and were honorably dismembered and interred here according to religious customs. The room was not a threat, at least until a handful of tiny poisonous spiders appeared from a small crack in the wall to attack. The combat lasted a few wild moments, all 4 spiders quickly destroyed, and before any of us were poisoned by the little fiends. In the scuffle, however, we managed to knock a shelf of bones to the floor. Mixed in with the bones was an old scroll case containing a scroll of magic missile, the only apparent treasure within the strange chamber. Returning to the dungeon's entrance, we then proceeded south, soon finding yet another bedchamber. This 20 by 30 room had been carved from greenish stone and layered with carpets, tapestries and all manner of decorated pillows. A large, grizzled and apparently ancient hobgoblin was seated amongst the pillows, and was, of all things, reading a large tome. The hobgoblin chieftain was a fearsome opponent but didn't seem to possess any fighting spirit, so we elected to try talking to him. The hobgoblin explained that the kobolds invaded the dungeon just recently, intent on launching a surprise attack upon the halfling village above. When asked about the missing children, the hobgoblin was willing to offer some advice for 5 gold pieces. We certainly couldn't trust the beastie, but we were hopeful he had some helpful information. The hobgoblin took our gold and explained that the dungeon was built decades ago by a religious order of the halflings above and was eventually abandoned and forgotten. Kobolds recently invaded and were growing bolder by the day. He wasn't surprised to hear about the kidnapped children. The hobgoblin knew that the kobold chieftain was somewhere to the east, but that's about it. We thanked the ancient creature and then headed south again. As we entered this octagonal room we were struck by an odd sight. Each wall had a small niche in it, and in each of them was a glowing skull. The skulls did not appear threatening but they were unusual. Over by the west wall were 5 humanoid creatures doing their best to pry out one of the skulls. Preoccupied by their task, they had yet to notice us, and while we could have attacked them with surprise, I instead elected to talk to them. The humanoids were orcs and rather fearsome. They eyed us up quite suspiciously and for a long moment we prepared for combat. Their leader then spoke, still suspicious but a hint of gratitude in his eyes. "You not backstab us, so we not fight you." The orc leader then ordered the other 4 to retreat and quickly they were gone. We then turned to the glowing skull in the western wall. Although the magical skull had been cemented into the wall, the orcs had almost freed it and it took little effort to pry the object from its location and take the item. The skull itself seemed unordinary apart from the light spell that had been permanently cast upon it, a sort of magical flashlight. I quickly examined the unusual item again and then secured it in my backpack. Traveling east now, Ariana again spotted a secret door, her elvish sight even keener than my own. The secret door opened to reveal a 20-foot square room. A large stone sarcophagus rested in the center of the chamber, decorated to imply that a brave halfling hero was interred there. A motionless halfling skeleton also stood in each corner of the room gripping an ancient spear. As we slid the lid off the dusty sarcophagus, a magic mouth spell activated and said, "Many baubles did I plunder from the dead. Now it is my turn to give up my baubles to the living. May they serve you as they served me." Like clockwork, the skeletal hero inside the sarcophagus sat up and looked at us, a wiry grin on its face. I didn't sense any evil from the undead hero but rather a chance to adventure one last time. Naturally, the 4 skeletons in the corner also attacked. Sainairs again used his power to turn undead, causing the corner skeletons to cower in the far corner. The skeleton hero was much more of a challenge, however, wounding several of us before we were able to defeat it. A moment later, we heard a strange clicking sound as the lid of the sarcophagus slid back into place, locking itself a moment later, and, apparently, forever. Fortunately, the real loot appeared to be on the skeleton hero itself, a ring of charm protection and another ring of protection. Proceeding further east past the hidden sarcophagus room, we soon found a huge wooden cage hanging suspended from the ceiling here, 3 small halfling children huddled together inside. We had found the kidnapped kids. However, a handful of kobolds stood beneath poking at them with various weapons and laughing while their leader sat next to a cooking fire. There they are. Redfern observed, pointing to the suspended cage. Now what? Let's try talking to the kobolds, Sainairs suggested. Taking the cleric's advice, I quickly gained the attention of the kobolds, who stopped their laughing and took us seriously. The kobold chieftain then stepped forward, gripping his short sword, but here to barter, not fight. You must be here to ransom these little brats. We weren't sure to ransom them or turn them over to the orc slavers. We want 50 gold pieces each. The kobolds were fearsome opponents, but I believed we could defeat them. Another option was to try convincing the kobolds to surrender, by bluffing that our party was far more powerful. I could also pay their ransom of 150 gold pieces, although that wouldn't stop them from kidnapping more halflings. What to do? Paying ransom for these children now will only encourage more kidnappings in the future. Eswin exclaimed, recognizing what we needed to do. The only way to end this is to put them down. The kobold chieftain pointed toward my party, made a motion across his neck to indicate that our throats were to be slit, then led his kobolds forward to attack. It was do or die for our party. As the kobold chieftain rushed Eswin to attack him directly, his short sword slightly glowing and hence magical, the rest of the kobolds took defensive cover and began raining stones on us from their slings. While painful, we retaliated with a full frontal assault, cutting down the kobolds one by one until only the chieftain remained, Eswin making short work of him as well. After a heroic fight, we had defeated the kobolds and saved the day. Our actions would not only help free the kidnapped children but put an end to the Kobold Menace up above in Cordona as well. We then quickly lowered the cage to the floor of the chamber and unlocked its crude door. The children continued to cower in the far corner of the cage, not sure of what to think. While tough on the kobolds, we were equally as kind and gentle to these halfling children, and they immediately rushed to us, crying tears of both joy and terror. Sensing the good in us, the children embraced all of us passionately, so very happy to have been rescued. Escaping the dungeon, we then returned the 3 rescued children to their parents, a splendid sight for all. The parents wept tears of joy at seeing their offspring returned to them, and they couldn't thank us enough for their daring rescue. Our expanded party's first real victory together. I then carefully watched Eswin for a few moments to see if even he could enjoy the moment. However, he seemed almost oblivious of the joy and celebration around him, and I wondered what horrible incident could have happened to him to essentially block such joy. As we stood there, additional halflings entered the large storage building and joined their brethren in their celebration, thanking us again and again. Each of the children personally bowed before us and then were led away by grateful parents, their happy voices soon a pleasant memory. Our little side quest was complete. And that's a wrap of episode number 8, Kobold Menace. Expect additional episodes every few weeks as the story continues.